All right, everyone, welcome to today's rendition of a Bible study about the Book of Corinth. This is going to be interesting and fun. So today we're going to start off a little bit with, first off, some history of the city of Corinth, because there's always a reason there's problems that we see in the Bible, whether it's good problems or bad problems to have. You always see it, so it's a good idea to understand why the cities like Corinth or Ephesus or Philippi, why those towns cause the specific problems that we tend to see in the churches. And we'll kind of delve into the first couple of chapters of the book. So let's start off with prayer. Maybe calm my nerves down a little bit. Dear Lord, thank you for this amazing day. Thank you for some of the wet weather we've got outside to help cool it down. And please be with this group as we dive into your book, and please be with me as we experience this for the first time and see where this goes. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. Corinth, city of Corinth. A lot more important than people think, because when you think Greece, you think Athens. City of diplomacy, city of scholars, of smart minds. Or you think of Sparta, warrior societies. Well, Corinth kind of is the bridge between these two worlds. Mainly because it sits on the bridge between these two worlds. So here we see, in its entirety, the Mediterranean Sea. To the east, you have Rome and you have Italy. To the west, we have Turkey and Israel down here. But here, this little bit that kind of connects these two bits of Greece is a very important city called Corinth. And what makes Corinth so special compared to any other city that we see in Greece? Well, it sits on a very small isthmus that connects the two kind of main bits of mainland Greece. To the south, we have places like Olympia, we have places like Sparta, we have very important cities to the south, but to the north we have other important cities like Thebes and Athens.
Does this park have a name?
So the island itself does have a name. I cannot remember what it is. And I say island because now it technically is an island. When Paul was visiting, it's not an island. It is one connected bay. But Corinth, sitting right on this little isthmus right here, is kind of the bridge and the gateway between the two sides of the Mediterranean we see earlier. Because this little bit of land right here, between here and here, is only 4 miles wide. You can see across it. If you were to start at our parking lot and as straight as the bird flies, go to the intersection of 10th and M Street in Gearing, that is how wide this isthmus is. So it's not very wide. And to both sides, you have very important cities to be trading with. To the west, you have Rome, you have all of Italy. To the east, you have Athens, and you have Turkey, and you have places like Cyprus, which huge places for wood and paper to be coming out of in this area. So all the trade of both the seas and the land end up coming through Corinth, which at the time of Paul would have been here. This is the modern city. We're not going to focus too much on this, but here is where Corinth would have been when Paul is writing these letters. Now, if we know anything about trade cities, is there's people of everything and everywhere meeting in one place. So not only do we have Greeks that live here, we have Jews, we have Africans, we have Romans, there's even signs that there were people from the north all the way up from Gaul that had traveled down here. Even before the Romans took over. So there are thoughts and ideas and religions from around the known world that have congregated into a single spot. Now, if we want an idea of what we're looking at, roughly, this is what Corinth looks like. To the south you have the seas, and it is a walled city that is relatively densely populated, and like the Greeks and Romans do, decorated very well, but also thought up very well. And you see that mountain up here. This little kind of mountain is called Acrocorinth, which we can kind of see here on the map. It overlooks the entire ancient city of Corinth. Well, if you know anything about your Greek mythology, Corinth is believed to have been the place where the goddess Aphrodite was born. When Uranus's genitalia were thrown into the sea, arose from the foam came this beautiful figure known as Aphrodite. Aphrodite is, in the Greek mythology, is the goddess of love, of desire, of sex from time to time. But this is, according to the Greeks, this is her most important place. And so, at Acrocorinth is the largest temple devoted to Aphrodite. And here you have temple prostitutes, you have just the overallness of, when you think of a god of desire and love and sex, you can only imagine what happens in this temple. So not only that, but the city itself has all of the ideas of a trade city. Because you have the sea, but you also have this main road that comes from the south that goes through Corinth before it goes up to the rest of mainland Greece. So, with that in mind, you can only imagine how hard it is for new Christians, especially at a time where Christians were not born into the religion, they were first converts into Christianity. They came from other religions, they came from other thoughts and beliefs and ideas. And now you're living in a city that is completely surrounding you with all of your bad habits. The best way I've ever thought about it is like a drug addict who gets clean. They finally break all their bad habits, but they never move out of the drug den. They're still there, they're still surrounded by it. To the point where this temple to Aphrodite at Acrocorinth becomes the church of Corinth. This place that was at one point used for the goddess of desire is now the Church of Christ overlooking the city. Not that it meant anything that it was overlooking, it just so happened to be where the building was. But we see because of that.
During New Testament times?
No. So this is one of the funny bits about Corinth in general. This city and this temple are like 7th to 5th century cities. They are old cities. But in the year 146, which is with the Republic of Rome.
BC?
BC.
Okay, thank you.
So 146 BC, they kind of start a war with the Republic of Rome at the time. So at this point, it's still the Republic. And the Romans being known for their warrior mentality and warrior society in general, they completely decimate the armies of Corinth. They kill all of the men and they sell the women and children into slavery. They leave Corinth and everything it was in the dirt, in the dust. And it sits abandoned for about 100 years. There's still some farmers that would farm around the area, but the city itself lay empty for 100 years until in 44 BC, Julius Caesar decides, I want that back. And so we're going to restart Corinth. And so he sends people back to Corinth, he reopens the city gates, and it begins to kind of build to even bigger statures now, because not only is it a city of the Greeks, where at the time it was a bunch of nation states, it's now a key city in the Roman Empire for Roman trade. And this is where we find ourselves in roughly, I want to say 1 Corinthians was, I believe, was written around 52 AD, something like that, which is where we start to find Paul writing letters to this city. And Paul starts off his letter very, very much like Paul starts off most of his letters. Sorry, these are also mine. He starts off most of his letters like he normally does. He gives a greeting. He doesn't automatically start off by either bashing them or by singing their praises. He simply greets them because, as a man that travels like he doesn't get to see the people of these churches very much, but he knows people there. He talks to people there. And so he greets them from wherever he's writing this. This is, I believe this is before his imprisonment in Rome. And so he's still traveling about to the Mediterranean when he writes this letter. And he starts off greeting them nice, cordial, but it doesn't stay that way super long. Mainly because both books of Corinthians are two of the only books that Paul writes where he almost never mentions a good thing the church is doing. I don't even think in the first book at all, there is a good thing that this church is doing that he mentions. All of the things that he says from the second half of chapter 1 onwards are all bad things this church is doing. So, his first, and one you kind of see pop up the most through this book, is division. This church is divided. And not like, oh, Eastern Orthodox or Roman Catholic or Lutheran. No. The members of this church all claim either I follow Paul or Cephas, or I follow Apollos, who is another, I don't think he's ever mentioned as an apostle at any point outside of, or inside of the scriptures, but maybe somewhere outside he's kind of mentioned. He's a great teacher from Alexandria. That is a Jew born in Alexandria that is taught. You meet him in Acts, actually. You meet him in Acts where he's speaking about the gospel, but he's not quoting it the right way, and so people pull him aside and kind of ask him how he heard of this or where he was taught, and kind of pull him back on to the right way, and he kind of follows under Paul's example for a long time. So they're saying, I follow this person, I follow this person, I follow this person. Nobody can agree on who they're supposed to be following. And Paul lays down this simple idea. Did I die on the cross for you? Did Cephas die on the cross for you? How about Apollos? The only person that died on the cross for you is Christ. Why are we arguing about who to be following? There's only one person to be following in all of this, and it's Christ. And he even goes on to state that he's really happy he only baptized a handful of people while he was there, because another problem they're having is they're saying, oh, because I was baptized by this person, that means I'm better than the person that was baptized by this other person. And so he kind of squashes this idea that who you're baptized by or when you're baptized is a big issue at all. And so he pleads with them for majority of this book. Hey, we are a united church, and we don't need to see division. We need to be following under the one Christ that died and rose again for our sins. he goes on to kind of, in a very Paul way, kind of backhandedly diss or kind of bring down the confidence or ego of the people. Because he pulls from Isaiah 29 by saying that God's going to destroy the wisdom of this world and that the wisdom of this world is folly for God. And that the power for God, the power of this world is also foolish and folly for God, because when you have as much power over the world that God does, what little bits that the world claims to have by making you a king or an emperor is nothing. But by doing this, he says, I am really happy, though, that most of you, when you guys became Christians, were not the smartest, we're not the wealthiest, we're not in positions of power. If anything, you're some of the dumbest, weakest, politically unimportant people I've ever met. But that's great, because that's who God can turn and make into people of importance in his kingdom. In the world of Christianity, when's the last time God, even in the Old Testament, most of the heroes that we think are of lowly birth. David was a shepherd. He was a boy that ran out with a sling and stone and protected sheep. And yet God raises him to be the king of Israel that prospers Israel for a long time, until his death, and then he raises his son Solomon to continue on that legacy. Importance is not what God is looking for. So he kind of says, hey, you don't need this ego. You don't need this brashness that this world tells you you need. Because to God, it doesn't matter. Because God can take the smallest, lowliest child and turn him or her into somebody of such importance that it kind of overshadows everything the world ever tells you you need to be or what you could be.
You're doing great, by the way.
Oh, I'm trying. Oh, I thought I was really overpacing myself. Here we go. Okay, so on to continue on with the idea that of who these people are. He reminds them that when he first came to Corinth, when he gave them the gospel, he didn't use the words of an intelligent or a scholarly man. Because Paul himself he was taught in all of this. By every means necessary, this man is a scholar. He's somebody that society would see as important because he's learned. He knows multiple languages. He knows religious texts by like the back of his hand. He himself is important, but when he comes here to Corinth, he says, I shared it to you, not in the words of wisdom or of a wise man, but at the simplicity of you, at this kind of like gut feeling level, where if I was to explain it to you, it would make sense and I didn't have to use any big words. I didn't have to use things that you guys didn't know about. And that's the way it needs to be taught, is at a level that meets you. Because if I would have used all my big fancy words, y'all probably wouldn't have picked up any of it. And kind of with this, he throws in this, another one of his gripes that he has with the church. That when I gave it to you, you guys, in your faith, were infants. You were young, you just learned about this, you're just starting, which is fine, which is the level you should have been. But I've left, I've walked away, and now, however many years later, you guys are still at the same level. You guys haven't grown, you haven't matured. You're still having these problems, as we'll see later, there's a person in this church that is having an explicit relationship with his mom, or stepmom, it doesn't really say, but his father's wife. And he boasts about it. And there are other people that boast about it for him. And he says, hey, even the other religions of this world say that what you're doing is wrong. Why are you boasting about this? And he says, the next time you see him, kick him out of the church. He doesn't belong here. Until he changes his attitude or the way he goes about life and actually kind of comes back and steps back into the way Christians are supposed to live, he's not welcome in the church. And it's a problem we explicitly see in Corinthians. No other churches are having problems like this. And you can say, well, and one of the reasons I brought up the history earlier is, why is this a problem? You have to remember, Corinth is a city that for so long was seen as the place where if you want to worship the God of desire, you go to Corinth. Or if you want to worship, there's even a large temple to Apollo there. If you want to go to these gods and do these things that that the Jews or Christianity sees as wrong, this is the place to go. And it's still the ideas and popular ideas there. It might have sat abandoned for 100 years and the temples that were in use weren't, but ideas like religion and gods and stuff like that, they die hard. It's very hard for an idea and a religion to finally fade away and to be changed and in thought. Because we don't hear people, there's very few, but nobody really talks about worshiping Zeus or worshiping the Greek gods or the Roman gods or the Norse gods. But for thousands upon thousands of years, that's how people thought. And this city is still in that era where the thought of doing these things, because that's what you're supposed to do in Corinth, are still prevalent and are still there. Because not only does he go from there, I'm really skipping ahead of myself because I think that's next week's stuff. Yeah, okay, so let's reel myself back in because I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But foreshadowing for next time. So with this, with that in mind, and he calls them infants. And so he kind of says, hey, you guys spiritually need to grow up. And I understand, it's not easy. Like, how do you sit there and say, oh, I'm a 23-year-old in faith, or I'm a 35-year-old, or I'm a 2-year-old? How do you measure your level of maturity in faith? And so he really goes into kind of speaking about spiritual growth and saying, hey, if you want to step out of this immaturity, here's what you have to do. You have to stop. One of the biggest things he says is, we live in the world, but we are not of the world. And so you have to step out of these things that you did while you were of the world and show that there is a difference that takes over you when you become a Christian. You're no longer, you're still, I'm still Nick. Bruce is still Bruce. Y'all are still who you are when you became a Christian, but it's the Nick of 2018, 2016, all that stuff is not the Nick of 2025 or 2024. And it's your actions not only are meant to be pleasing to God, because they are, when you're doing good things and you're walking the path that God set before you, God's happier than he ever could be. And he understands you're going to stumble and fall, but he's always there to help. And so he really emphasizes, hey, you guys need to start walking this path again. This is why I called you dumb, weak, unimportant people. Because you might have been then, But if you keep going the way you're going, that's how you're going to stay. But if you take the words that I gave you in the gospel and the scriptures that these people would have access to, if you take those and you follow them and you separate yourself from the world, people are going to start noticing. And one of the biggest things is when people notice that you're acting different, they get curious. And they start to step towards that direction. And he mentions this way later, that how you live your life will determine your ability to save other people as well. But you can't be an infant trying to help the infant, just as the blind can't help the blind. So you have to start kind of growing up spiritually. And he really starts to emphasize that, hey, I understand that you guys are still infants in this, and I'm going to help you in ways that are going to help you grow, because you don't give an infant hard food. You give it milk. But at some point, you have to kind of wean off the milk and on to some of the harder stuff. Like, the gospel is the most simple and beautiful idea ever, but it's also complicated and complex and otherworldly to the point where people have been studying this and learning and following this for thousands of years, and they still don't know it all or understand it all. And that's the beauty of this. So I don't expect you to become scholars overnight, but at least make the effort to step out and become these more mature Christians rather than infants. He goes on to say that, kind of to the point of division, he kind of circles back to this point of division where he says, Apollos and I, we're like farmers, and you guys are seeds. All the farmer can do is plant a seed and water it and tend to it. We can't, like a farmer can't make a seed grow. He can do all the right steps to help it grow. But how many of you guys have had gardens where you thought you did everything right and nothing grew?
Mark, I saw that one.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. He says, hey, all we are farmers. We planted the seed. And we can water it, we can help kind of let it take firm. But God's the only one that can make it grow, but you have to be willing to let him do that. You can't just say, oh yeah, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior. Here I am going off again to do all the bad things I was doing before. You have to let the change take hold. And so, like, people like Bruce, yes?
All right, so this rant is good. What do you find this now? So just think on your feet for a second. Do you think you are now ranting about the theme of the book? Meaning, is it possible that they thought salvation was a one-time event and didn't realize that there was more beyond salvation inside of Christianity? If Christianity was how to go to heaven, then it's a box you check, and you would see yourself. So is there anything in the book that as I think through it, and now you've been in it more than me, but as I think through it, it seems like that could be a pretty substantial way of thinking for them, and they're in a trap, and they don't even realize that Christianity has more.
Yeah. So I think just going into this, I will admit I hadn't figured out the theme yet, and that's the thing. If I haven't figured it out, I'll let y'all know. 90% of this is flying off the seat of my pants.
Yeah,
It's like this is the longest 8-second bull ride I've ever been on, and I've never ridden a bull.
Yeah, you don't get it. You realize what you say.
But I think I'm getting really close to what Paul is saying, because there is an overarching thing that even when we get into some of the later sections later, he still finds a way to kind of come back to these thoughts of spiritual growth and maturity and unity. And I think probably by next week I'll have the topic or the theme of what this is going to be about. For now, we're going to keep running by the seat of our pants, and I'm going to think on that, considering we won't have Bible study next week because of my work schedule.
Yeah, so there's a week off next week. He works night shift.
Yes, I work night shift, so we will be off next week. But then we'll get 3 weeks of this, and we should be done.
Yeah, it feels to me like you're ranting right there about the theme.
Mm-hmm.
The weakness is they think salvation might be all there is.
Yep.
Okay.
And so,
Keep going.
And that they don't have to change. They're,
no.
they're saved and that's it.
Yeah,
There's
Yeah,
no
they
more
think
to it.
that oh, once I'm saved, that's it. I've checked the box on getting into heaven. And there's more. That's page 1. There's still about a lot of pages left. So with that and kind of this whole spiritual growth, he's talking about how him and Apollos are farmers. He even goes on to say that the other apostles, these other people to lean from, we're nothing but servants. We are lowlifes. We don't have jobs. We travel around like vagrants that bounce from place to place, that live off of the grace and mercy of other people. We aren't what society says is, oh, these are powerful people because they're traveling around. No, society says the powerful people live in castles. Powerful people wear purple, wear reds, wear these high-end linens, and have gold embossed portraits of themselves hanging up in their houses, or have a house like the Roman. If you want to think of how the Romans do it, their houses are internally heated in the winters by having boiled water underneath their house, so that the floor of the house, if this is your house, like this, there's another wall and chamber outside it like this that connects in with fires that burn under here and heat up the air in here. So while you're standing on the floor, this is the worst stick man ever, while you're standing on the floor, your floor is warm compared to sleeping on straw or on the dirt. This is what the world is saying is of importance. But all the people, like all the apostles and all the servants of Christ, we sleep on the dirt. I can't remember the last time I had a shower, is pretty much what he's saying. But here's the thing about being a servant, and especially a servant of Christ. When you read this for the first time, Paul sounds really judgy about what they're doing. And he says it in, I want to say it's chapter 3. He sits there and says, hey, this might sound really judgy, and what I'm about to continue saying sounds really judgy, but this isn't judgment. It's not my place to judge. I don't even judge myself, but even though I'm not judging myself, that doesn't mean I'm off the hook for the things that I've done. Because the only person that Paul says is the only person that has the right to judgment is Jesus and is God. So who am I to take a responsibility from God and pass it on to everyone else? Who am I to be a judge? Because last time I checked, servants aren't judges. When's the last time you went to court and picked up somebody's butler and said, "Hey, you're gonna preside over this legal issue"? Because that's nuts to have somebody that hasn't showered, has probably the mangliest unkept beard in the Mediterranean at the time, is saying, "Hey, I might be judgy, and there's people inside your own church that are going to judge you. It's not your place to judge, just as it's not my place to judge either, because there's only one judge. And it's the same person that sat up on a cross for a couple of hours and died without saying a word." Like, think of it this way. Christ endured something that most people never would have endured. And the Bible is really good about saying how people feel and things they say in pain or excitement or anything. And the entire time Jesus' death and his torture leading up to it, not once does it mention he cried out in pain, he cried out, he said anything. He says nothing until he's already on the cross, about to die, and he speaks to two criminals and then says, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," and finally died. He endured something that none of us have endured and didn't say a word. And yet here we are, especially with Corinthians, people of an infant level of maturity of faith, judging others that are at the same level. It's like sitting there going, "Ha ha, I'm better than all of you." But I have no idea what all of you are doing because I'm doing the same things because I decide to not look at what I'm doing and only at what you're doing. And so he says, don't judge. Why in the world are you judging? I don't even judge. And if there's anyone amongst all of us that has any right to judge, it's me. But I don't, because it's not my responsibility to judge. And that's kind of where he leaves off in this section, because the next section he starts going into.
What's the section? Do you have?
So chapters 1 through 3 is kind of this main section that deals with division. It deals with the spiritual growth and the immaturity of the Corinthians at the time, and kind of how to, like, for them, kind of, because he might say this thing, but at the end he kind of gives this hope that there's, like, hey, you might be doing this, but here's how you can fix it. You just have to kind of look at this and say, hey, I might have just bashed you for what feels like 30 minutes in writing, because that's probably how long it took me to write it all down, because I might have broken 3 or 4 pens trying to do this. I don't know, maybe. He seems like an angry guy sometimes. But here, I love you enough that I'm going to give you the answers to what you're having problems with. You just have to take those answers and actually do them, which is the hardest part, because when's the last time somebody told you you're doing something wrong and you went, yeah, that's actually exactly what I'm doing wrong. I'm going to change that right now. No, because I know that happened to me today at work, and I said, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about, and walked off. It happens to all of us. And they're just doing a really good job of walking off and saying, you don't know what you're talking about.
Sure, you gotta go to work tomorrow.
Oh, I do.
Oh my
That's
God.
the thing.
I got Bible study next week.
That's the thing. I gotta see that person tomorrow. But the important bit is Paul, well, through this book, he never says anything directly nice about the Corinthians. He might in the 2 Corinthians, but from what little bit I've read of it before going into this, it's the same thing of him just not. It's like, hey, remember this first one I wrote you? Why am I having to write a second one? And it's believed that the 2 that we have are not even the first and second one that he wrote to them. They're the 2nd and the 4th one he wrote to them. There's 2 other ones that we don't know what he's talking about. But they do. The Corinthians knew. And he says even in the first one multiple times, hey, this is what I want to write to you now, but the next time I come and see you, we're really going to dive deep into this. And the next time I come see you, I'm going to stay for like months to work on this. Like, this isn't going to be a little pop-in, hey kids, it's the weekend, holidays, bye. This is, okay kids, what have I told you about paying rent? What have I told you about cleaning the bathroom? What have I told you about doing your laundry? I'm not leaving until you have some good habits. That's what he says this multiple, not that way, but he says, I'm going to spend months with you guys. And so in the next section, which is chapters 4, 5, 6, and a little bit of 7, because 7 gets into some weird stuff that is really Paul specific that you really won't see, and his views on marriage is pretty much what chapter 7 looks at. There's some good things to pull in there, but it's really weird to have to try to tie that chapter in with the previous 3 chapters. Because the next set of chapters really kind of dives into the sexual immorality problems that this church is having, like I mentioned earlier. And that's kind of where we'll pick up next week with, in 2 weeks, my bad, is this problem that they're having that if you look into the history of the city, really is a big problem, not only for the city itself, but if it's a problem for the city, it's going to bleed into the church because the people live there. The people are there. It's not like they can just go, oh hey, I'm going to go to this church, but I live in Kimball, so when I'm done here, I can just leave all the problems of Scottsbluff and run off to Kimball. These people can't do that. They go up a mountain, a small mountain, but a mountain, to go to church, and then turn around after it's done, and march right back into this city that is full of all of these awful, awful ideas from around the world that pretty much are about as dead opposite from Christianity as you can get sometimes. And it's really interesting to see how Paul addresses this now, and kind of addresses it through the rest of the book. Kind of secretly, underhandedly keeps talking about division and sexual immorality throughout the rest of the book, because these first 3 chapters were really devoted to, hey, let's not be divided, let's grow our faith, and let's not put ourselves on pedestals higher than we need to be. That's the main point of those first 3 chapters. But even in chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7, there's kind of some subtleness of, hey, there might be some sexual immorality things going on here, but hey, let's not be divided when we talk about this either. Or we move on even more after that he kind of starts going more towards the idea of, hey, we talked about division, we talked about sexual immorality. Let's talk about what we're doing in the world and how the rest of the world perceives us. He goes over the case of 4 chapters in 8, 9, 10, and 11, saying, hey, this is how the world sees us. We don't have to follow these old traditions that the Jews or the Greeks or any of these have. But the way you act in public is going to have an effect on how other people interpret what the Church of Christ is. But hidden in all of that is themes of non-division, of unity, of fleeing from sexual immorality. And then he finally, at the very end of the book, the last 4 chapters, he kind of revisits each of these main topics again. Kind of gives them one more chapter to be like, hey, I know you're probably on like page 4 to 10 of this letter, because I don't know how long this letter is. You're deep into this letter. But let's not forget what we talked about at the beginning of this letter either. And so he kind of gives a final chapter, and then kind of at the very end, like Paul always does, he says, hey, I just reamed you for however many pages of this letter. But I still love you. And not like this kind of love. Like that love. Like, that's what when you get yelled at by your parents when you were younger, or when you yell at your kids as a parent, this is the kind of love those kids feel. It's lowercase love. It's a little bit of love. We understand that you're yelling at us for a reason, but we don't like it. When Paul says, I love you at the end of this book, he's saying, I love you. He's pretty much saying, I get it. We're going to have problems. We're human. We're not perfect at all. But there's very little that you can do that won't make me not love you. Because what you are brothers and sisters in Christ still. And so I might have just reamed you and tore into you like your dad did when you brought that stray dog home, or when he found out that you're 13 and you knocked up your girlfriend. No,
That didn't happen.
did not happen. But I might have just, but I might have just tore into you for all that. But that won't affect this, how much I love and I care about you. And I want you to know that. I want you to remember that this is the size of the love I'm having. Not just this little, I love you. I love you, Mom. Okay, bye. Bye, Mom. I love you. It's, Mom, get over here. I'm hugging you for a solid 10 minutes kind of love.
It doesn't matter what you do, I love you.
And so that's where he finishes us off. He finishes the book saying, hey, it's all right. We're going to work through this. We're going to get better. I love you. I can't wait to see you again. He pretty much, it almost is exclusively translated for that as like, I can't wait to see you guys again. Like, when I was there, it was great. So many of you converted over. I know I didn't baptize people, but that's for a reason. But I love you guys, and it was great being there, and I can't wait to be back. Because when I come back, we're going to work on so much stuff, and it's going to be so much fun.
Oh, it'll be fun.
And so
We're working here.
yeah, we're working there, and so as we continue through the rest of this book, you'll see this book really is kind of chunked out in fourths over his ideas, where the idea that he starts in chapter 1 finishes at the end of chapter 3 to chapter 4. Where he starts the next one, he finishes it about four verses, chapters later. And so it's really easy to kind of pick apart. It's like, okay, this set of chapters is talking about this. This set of chapters is talking about this. And so next week we'll really dive into kind of where I foreshadowed with the idea, not next week, I keep saying that, in 2 weeks, of kind of the sexual immorality problems and how Paul wants to help them change in the right direction and what they need to be doing. And it'll be really interesting because they have some really interesting problems with sexual immorality compared to a lot of other churches. And personally, I think a lot of it has to do with the city and the heritage that city has with the idea of love and sexual morality and everything that has to go into what is a relationship, not only in a spiritual sense, but a physical sense as well. So I can't wait to talk about that in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Next week you get a week off of having to listen to this face ranting again. But in 2 weeks we'll be back.
Good.
Good job, Jake.